Ladies and gentlemen, welcome all. I'm Jason Baum, the President and CEO of the Round Rock Chamber, and I want to thank you for joining us for today's session about getting back to work. I think something that we're all extremely interested in. We have a fantastic panel of presenters today, and I can't wait to get into the topics and especially hear the Q&A from today's session. Looks like we have just about 40 people on the Zoom session right now. I think we're going to be adding more as we get into it, but I'm getting the go sign from our leadership, and so we're going to get started. Thank you again. I'm Jason Ball. I'm very proud to serve the Round Rock Chamber here in Round Rock, Texas, and I want to welcome everyone to our session on how to prepare your office to reopen. We've got two primary guest speakers today. Antonia Cardone with Cushman and Wakefield, and then Michael Burleson with Emerson Automation Solutions. Real quick, before we get started, I want to address just a couple of housekeeping items. Today, you're going to notice you're muted. The plan is that everyone is going to remain muted so that we don't have disruptions in the presentations today, but please, if you have questions throughout the program, I'm going to be watching the Q&A section. So if you mouse down to the center of your screen, you can see a Q&A chat box. You can ask questions of the panelists through me, and that's how we'll be handling the questions that you might have. I also want to let everyone know that we've designated some time at the end for additional Q&A, and we've asked Brooks Bennett with the City of Round Rock and Derek Neal with the Williamson County Cities and Health District to also join us for this call. We invited them specifically because we thought perhaps some more localized questions might come up in your mind as you're getting ready to return to your business with your team, and ask them to join us. So we thank them both for their time and participation today. I also want to thank our sponsor, and that's Express Commercial Cleaning. Today's program would not be possible without them, so we want to thank them for their support. Express Commercial Cleaning just celebrated their 12th year in business this last April. They specialize in janitorial services and porter service, as well as enhanced disinfection and electrostatic spraying. Earlier this year, they joined the Texas Inc. 5000, celebrating the fastest growing companies across all of Texas, and have also previously received recognition in Hispanic Magazine's 500 top Hispanic-owned companies. And to hear from them, I want to ask Evelyn Travernier to tell you just a little bit more about Express Commercial Cleaning. Evelyn, are you on the call here?
Yes, I am. Good morning, everybody. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you for the introduction, Jason. And I also want to thank the Chamber for being on such an important topic webinar right now, as everybody, is anxiously waiting to get back to the office, what that might look like. And we're going to hear from our presenters at Cushman and Wakefield and Emerson Automation for those best practices, tips for getting back to the office safely, which is what is on everybody's mind. What a difference, a couple of months can make, right? It seems like our world has changed, completely. And so, I'm thankful that all of you guys are here for, picking up tips and just any information that you can get to get safely back to your office, whether you're a business owner, property manager, or an employee. This is all top of mind, obviously. So we are local. We're here in Round Rock. We're right off of County Road 172 in McNeil, actually right behind Rush Automotive, if you guys know where that's at. Let's see, specializing in commercial cleaning options. I know early March, we actually started making the switch over to not just focused cleaning, but truly disinfecting. And so that kind of changed our protocol on, the PPE that we're using, the disinfectant that we're using. And so as you guys think about getting back to the office, we truly want to be your partner in helping you, successfully get back to the office. Thanks again, guys.
Evelyn, thank you so much. Again, everyone, I want to recognize that without express commercial cleaning, we wouldn't be able to have today's session. So we just appreciate you so much, Evelyn, and thanks for doing what you do and helping companies get back up and moving right now. All right, now we'll shift into our main content for today. We've got the pleasure of introducing Antonia Cardone with Cushman and Wakefield. Antonia leads workplace strategy and change management practices for Cushman and Wakefield. She's based out of San Francisco, and she's delivered projects globally, but her areas of focus and experience tend to be in North America and in the Asia Pacific. Antonia and her team create strategic plans to optimize space utilization, create dynamic and flexible workplace environments, and future-ready buildings and portfolios. Also on the call today is our local Cushman and Wakefield friend, Brett Araby, who you may hear from later during our Q&A session. Thank you for joining us, Brett. Antonia is a frequent industry speaker and teacher on workplace strategies and trends, and so we are excited to have her with us today. Antonia, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. Let me just get some video going here, and we can be underway. Oops, wrong button. Apologies, folks. How about if I just get started here and pick up the video as we move along. So let me begin by just saying that Cushman and Wakefield have been studying what happens in the work environment for years now. We have our own proprietary tool called Experience Per Square Foot at Home, which is a survey that helps us understand what it is that people are actually experiencing when they're working from home. We understand that people have been struggling with a few elements while they've had that experience. One of those is a sense of renewal, and that is feeling motivated and engaged while they're at work. And there are other elements in play there also. We'd be happy to share that information with you, and there is some information around that available on our website. We also understand that people in life before COVID, have been using the office in a relatively limited fashion. Through our own studies across the globe over years, we've come to recognise that seats are only being sat in about 56% of the time before COVID. So these two pieces of information together started us off at the beginning of March with a basis of knowledge that helped us understand that people were already working from home, had many skills related to that in many cases, and we were very interested to watch how the experiment would develop around people being remote 100% of the time. Our response at the beginning of this COVID crisis began with some podcasts talking about how to balance work and life, some infographics you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner there about how to work successfully from home. And then we realized that as an organization, we had an enormous knowledge base through our colleagues in China, who in the previous months before we were addressing this issue, had been working with multiple organizations, taking about 1 million people in about 800 million square feet of space, representing about 10,000 companies, taking them back to work. And those of you who have been watching what's been happening in China would understand that nearly 100% of the workforce is back in action there. So learning from that, Cushman and Wakefield is very strong in China. Learning from that, we recognized that there were some best practices that we could bring to the rest of the world. And so we've partnered with the World Living Lab, which is an organization that's focused very much on testing and measuring the impacts of our efforts. The Mayo Clinic is also involved there, and Delos, an organization focused very much on measuring the building services within a building. We also had our partners in our Amsterdam office step ahead of the curve a little bit and try an experiment, a prototype experiment in their own office called the 6 Feet Office. And if you Google the 6 Feet Office, you'll find there are some videos there that are certainly out in the wild, have gone a little viral, that show how the office could be reconfigured and rethought in order to be safe. And so putting all of that knowledge together, we at Cushman and Wakefield came up with a document we're calling our Recovery Readiness How-To Guide. You can see the front cover of that document here on the right-hand side of this dashboard. This document is about 30 or so pages of really valuable suggestions, recommendations, considerations for you to use. It's available to you free. For you to use in preparing to return to your work environments. If you go to our Cushman and Wakefield website, it's there. I believe Lauren has posted a link associated with this webinar, and we're happy to share that with you if you'd like to reach out to us. So in that document, there are many good suggestions. We have been hearing over the last couple of months many organizations using that document as a guide to help them prepare for returning. And most of what I cover this morning in my half an hour here will be elements that you will find in that document. So feel free to take notes, but it's all documented fully for you there if you would like to go. So, I'm sorry, I just heard a little feedback there. Was there a question? Okay, proceeding. Onto the beginning part here. As you're beginning to think about how you're preparing yourselves, there are a collection of layers to consider and to think about where you are on this pyramid, if you like. I know there are many varied people attending this morning, so hopefully you can see yourself on this diagram in some position here. And if we really just take it from the top, and we think about the levels of control that we have available to us and where we fit on this spectrum. At the municipal level, we have our local authorities focused on our public spaces. That's our streets, for those of us who are coming and going from work, that's our commutes, that's the public environment under municipal control. So we're definitely responding to the messaging, regulations and controls that those authorities put in place on our behalf. As we arrive at work and we step across the threshold into a building, we're really moving into a privileged space where the landlord essentially has control. That's how the entrance of the building works, what provisions are made there for our safety. Then when we move through the building, through those common spaces in the building into our own tenancies, assuming that we're in a multi-tenant building, it's really sort of moving into our own private space where our organisations, our corporates have control of those environments. And we may be looking at specific protocols that address the crossing of that threshold, whether you might have sanitation stations there, etc. But once you move into that space, really moving into an environment that is kind of under the control of the culture of the organisation, where we have protocols in place that will help us behave in a safe fashion at work. And they're really these interpersonal agreements that we align with each other. We don't bump into each other in corridors. We're generally polite. We wait our turn for the coffee pot. Those kinds of sort of natural agreements that we have about behaving comfortably in our own work environment. And some of those are going to change as a result of COVID-19. Then we move further into our space, and if we imagine we're sitting at our desk or in a meeting room, we're really then very much subjected to the interpersonal relationships between ourselves and our peers. Everybody will make independent decisions about how close to approach each other, how much to engage with each other in thinking about the provisions and the safety precautions around virus transmission. And then we arrive at our individual desk where we like to think we have absolute control. That's our personal space. We can clean it as frequently as we like. We can control the elements there. and that includes things like what's on our work surface and our technologies. And so Cushman and Wakefield has addressed many of these elements. Our 6 feet office principles that I'll speak about here address some of these, and our Safe 6 principles that I'll also speak about here today address a few more. But you know that there are official guidelines out there from the Centers for Disease Control and OSHA. And in the middle of May, they published some really good material. There is a workplace decision tool on the CDC website that really helps you understand whether you're ready to reopen. And there is definitely guidance there on preparing workplaces for COVID-19. So please use all of these tools available to you as you think about what it is that you need to prepare in this entire environment as we are ready to go back to work. But where to start? Here at Cushman and Wakefield, we've defined sort of 3 phases of time, if you like: the response time, reopening, and then the reimagine idea beyond that. So in responding, you would need to understand the critical elements around your own leases and the agreements that you have in place with your landlords, etc. You may wish to address some rent relief programs that are available and any modifications to your leases. You also want to be well aware of what's going through the mind of your employees. And you'll also need to be thinking about cost containment at this difficult time when some businesses are no longer generating the revenue that they're accustomed to. As you then plan to reopen, which is mostly where we'll focus today, you'll want to begin to think about how you need to modify your environments, how you need to implement an enhanced cleaning and maintenance protocols. You may need to source and procure specific supplies that you wish to have on hand for your workforce. And you're also going to want to prepare your folks for coming back to the office. So communicating with them in advance of the date you say is you're reopened for business and they're welcome back to the office. So that relationship with your workforce is established before day 1, Monday morning. As you think forward, though, this reopen phase is temporary. We don't know for how long it's temporary, but we understand that it is something we're going to move through. And as we move through that, we're going to move into this sort of reimagine phase where we really begin to think of what will be the new long-term normal, what fundamental changes will be in place going forward. And what will we need to do to prepare for that and have our work environments be effective? And that will include, different health and safety considerations, perhaps, than what we've had in past. We may think about a new workplace strategy. We may be thinking about what proportion of our workforce remains working from home, potentially, and perhaps fewer people might come to the office. And when they do come to the office, it might actually work quite differently. And what might that be like? We might think about offices in certain locations being more or less desirable, and we may want to change our portfolio strategies, etc. So there are many things to think about in the long run. This is 2021 and beyond. What fundamentally will be different about the way we provide work environments for our workforce? So recognizing that there are a collection of things to do as time goes by. But let me start with the Safe 6. These are the things that in the short term really need to be considered. These are the workplace readiness essentials. I believe these are available to you for signing up for this webinar, and you'll see a great checklist here of lots of details. Let me just take it at a pretty high level here to get us going. Firstly is preparing the building, if this is your part of your responsibility, and think about the layers of control pyramid from before. So this involves cleaning plans, considerations in relation to loading docks, sort of new procedures in place for dealing with waste and receipt of items into and out of the building. So that's looking at have the air conditioning systems been refreshed? Are you actually ready from a building perspective to reopen? Are you prepared for that? Have you got all of your PPE programs in place, along with control of the perimeter of the building? Are you understanding who will be coming and going, etc.? So preparing the building at the highest level. This may involve also signage in the parking lot, those kinds of things that will direct people in a new way through the building. Number 2 is preparing the workforce. This is engaging with your people to understand what they're experiencing right now, whether they're ready to come back to work, those people who perhaps are not appropriately or not well suited to return to work at this time of high volatility. We know that there are a high number of new cases in your and adjacent counties, and so there are some people who will be very anxious about their health and understanding what it is that they're going through at this period of time and whether they're ready to return. So that's really dealing with your people in anticipation of coming back. Number 3 is controlling access. And I mentioned some of these elements in relation to preparing the building, but in relation to our own tenancy, if you're a subtenant within a building, what are the things that are going to happen at your front door? Are you going to allow deliveries? How are you going to make sure that those deliveries are actually clean and disinfected? Are you going to require that people, sanitize their hands and wear masks as they arrive into your space or not? How are you going to control who comes and goes? This might be a time to say to your guests or clients potentially who visit your space, we are not accepting visitors for the next couple of months, those kinds of things. So what measures would you like to put in place in order to control access to your own space, so that you're understanding of who's coming in and whether they may be carrying virus or not? And number 4 is creating a social distancing plan, so that when people are in that space, they're actually understanding and practicing good social distancing protocols. This may involve making some markings on the floor. This may involve decommissioning some seats even, and taking some desks, if you have a sort of traditional office environment out of action right now. It also might mean removing some chairs from meeting rooms so that you can't get a big group of people in a space that once, perhaps could become crowded. So looking at your own space and creating that social distancing plan. And of course, that is part of what needs to be communicated to your workforce before they come. Number 5 is reducing touch points and increasing cleaning. So if you think of the dozens, perhaps hundreds of things that you touch in your own work environments throughout the day, trying to focus on which one of those can be reduced and potentially eliminated as being a touch point at all, and increasing the cleaning for those that are not able to be eliminated. So things like door handles, maybe a suitable time to prop some doors open and keep them in a propped open position so that there's less handling of doors. Methods to address how you deal with bathrooms are relevant, and when we're thinking about this element, how we deal with items in kitchens. Light switches may be appropriate to sign and label, please don't touch the light switch throughout the day, leave it in the on position constantly so that we don't have multiple people touching things like that unnecessarily in their time at work. So really moving through your own work environments and scanning for all that stuff that people touch, the printer buttons, the copier machines, the staplers in a common place, all of those kinds of things, whiteboard markers in meeting rooms, etc. And looking to reduce those as much as possible and increase the cleaning protocols and regimes for those items that are not able to be reduced. And lastly, and most importantly, this communication for confidence. Your workforce wants to know that you've been in there and thoroughly considered their experience and their safety before they come back. They need to know that what plans are in place, and they're going to need to know ongoing what plans you have and what protocols you have to protect their safety. Just imagine that you have somebody exhibiting symptoms in your work environment. What are the behaviours that you expect of the remainder of the colleagues? Is evacuation necessary? What cleaning protocols will be reinstated overnight when you have symptomatic people in your workplace, when you've discovered that? What's the emergency procedure? Does that person need to isolate themselves? Does an ambulance need to be called, et cetera, et cetera? Just working out what it is that you as an organization are going to do, and then communicating that for your workforce in anticipation of their return, and then once they do return, continually reinforcing those protocols as you go forward. So communicating for confidence is really a critical factor in having everybody feel comfortable and behaving appropriately in the work environment. As we move on then and think about who it is that's coming back, we at Cushman and Wakefield are thinking about the workforce in these three categories. Firstly, the folks who need to be in the office. They need to be in the office. On the far right-hand side, there are some folks who need to work from home for now. And then in the middle is what we're considering is the majority of the workforce who can work from home or from the office. So as we think about where your workforce is distributed across these three categories, there's a few different ways to think about this. Those people who need to be in the office are the people who require materials, equipment, and tools. The accoutrement of their work is fundamentally in the office. Imagine if you worked in a laboratory. You don't have a laboratory at home. You can't conduct experiments, etc. From your home workplace. You really need to be in the office for that, or in the lab for that. There are people, of course, who have needed in-person interactions. If you imagine sort of a SWAT team, perhaps even focused on a COVID response of some sort, that would require that those people come together for quick access to each other. We think about those people who are really most productive at the office, people who don't have a conducive work environment at home and really need a place that is separate from their home in order to work. They perhaps don't have good equipment there. They perhaps don't have a desk. It might be their homes might be a busy place and they need to get away in order to focus. So there are a collection of people who really need to be in the office. It's important to understand those and understand and define those people, and to have them be the first group back. Everybody else outside of this required group can really wait for a second wave, so that these folks who need to be in the office come in, re-establish themselves, establish new protocols, become familiar with the way to social distance and avoid touch points, and then you can invite the remainder of your workforce back. But bearing in mind the folks on the far right side here, the people who need to consider working from home for now as a sort of more permanent situation. They're people who might be considered at risk from a health perspective. They're people who may have family obligations, childcare, etc. at these times when all our own all our typical practices might be in disorder right now, where childcare facilities may not have reopened, that kind of thing. So people have other responsibilities right now at home. And then people who are potentially unable to commute with safety. You may have heard of some train systems, etc., that have become, sort of risky places to be in commute. And so there may be folks who have a combination of factors here that would suggest that they're unsuited for returning to the office right now. So that leaves everybody in the middle there who are capable of working productively from both places, who have safety in their commute to and from work, and who have no elevated health risks. So these are the folks who you want to engage sort of second in coming back to the office, once you have the folks on the left back and practicing new protocols. So think about how your workforce is distributed amongst these three categories, and take a very patient, slow return to work, first with those folks who just need to come back. When people do come back, there is a series of principles that apply in the office, and we're calling this our 6 feet office principles. These images here are photographs taken from our Amsterdam office, where we went in over a long weekend, recarpeted to show these bubbles, if you like, around each desk, spaced the furniture apart. Those bubbles represent a 1.8 metre or 6 feet perimeter around the individual. And so they're really sort of a subtle or not so subtle indication to the other people in the office about how much distance they need to leave when approaching or passing by somebody else's seat. Now, we know that this may not be practical for every organisation, but just as a symbol here of how we need to practice and keep our distance from each other when we're in the office. So what to do for yourselves? And analyse your current work environment. Quickly scan what you have in your office. Think about the areas where you have really tight corners, tight spaces between individuals, and think about how you might be able to increase that distance, perhaps by taking some seats even potentially out of action. And that could be done by removing chairs or perhaps taking some equipment off desks, etc. Maybe even just a sign on that desk. This desk can no longer be used, because perhaps the two desks on either side are still in action. So do that quick scan. Set up those protocols that really put safety first. So think about how people move through the space. Think about where things will be and what you might like people to practice in order to keep that distance from each other. Think about a 6 feet route. That is a circulation path around the office that helps people keep a distance. That might even be a one-way traffic route through your office. So when people step out of the elevator, maybe in past they had the choice of turning either left or right. Maybe now directions will suggest they turn left and they move through the work environment in a clockwise pattern, so that they reduce the passing by of each other throughout the day. Looking then at the workstations in detail, addressing the distances between them, addressing the surfaces within the work environment, and certainly the vertical panels. This may be a time where you realize you might want to install some acrylic vertical panels, as if you like, the kind of sneeze guard idea between some desks if you can't maintain that kind of distance from each other. And then the whole experience, as I spoke previously, some change management, helping people with training and guidance about how to operate in this work environment effectively, because practices will be a little different, at least in the short term going forward. It's not just hurry back to work and life goes on just the way it was before. So there are 6 feet office principles. And this is a depiction of what it might be like when you actually consider your work environments. You can see here in the bottom left-hand corner of this floor plan, that's the elevator bank. So in this floor plan in particular, there are challenges immediately when one steps out of the elevator for keeping distance from peers. And so we looked at how we might route people through the space. There are things like stickers that can be applied to the carpet, etc., that encourage people to continually move in the same fashion. Think about meeting rooms. In the top left and bottom right hand corner of this image are some meeting spaces. Think about how you move through a meeting room in one direction. The first person into the room takes the seat furthest from the door, so that you're not needing to squeeze past each other to get everybody in the room. Those kinds of protocols are things you're going to want to think about before people come back to work, and share that with them. Also, in this floor plan, you can see on the far right-hand side, there are some bench seats. And some of those on this floor plan would actually need to be decommissioned, so that then they go out of use. It would mean that people were just sitting too close to each other if they used all of those desks. So when we think about this floor plate, it may have originally been able to accommodate perhaps 100 people. And with this social distancing plan in place, maybe it has a reduced capacity of something like 70 people. So as we're planning to return to work, at least to begin with, we are not going to want to, on this floor plate, invite more than 70 people to return. So that ties in nicely with that previous idea about who in the workforce needs to come back, who can continue working from home most effectively, and perhaps those who need to remain working from home, so that we don't get too many people back into these spaces beyond what can be comfortably accommodated by maintaining social distancing. And so if we decide that 70 is the new capacity of this floor plate, and we look at who needs to come back, we may have assessed through those who need to be in the office, there might be only 40 people who need to be back. And in that case, we're looking at 40 people using a space that originally accommodated 100 seats, and now we have a very manageable situation where we're going to be at low risk of crossing each other too much throughout the day. So you can see that thinking in action there. We keep the number of people down who are returning into the work environment, can maintain the social distancing, and wait this out until we have safer procedures in place that might involve tracing and tracking people who are infected. It may involve a vaccine, it may involve new treatments. But in the short term, without those things in place, we need to be thinking about using our space in a slightly different fashion. You can also see here a whole lot of notes about how new protocols may be relevant for certain parts of the space, and I'd be happy to take some questions on this when we move on here into Q&A. Here towards the end, we'll talk about we talk a little bit about a change management plan. So what is it that you're actually going to share with your employees and prepare them to be effective in this place? We want a really soft landing. We don't want people surprised. We don't want people anxious. It's a time of anxiety, bringing people back to groups here. And so we want to do that in a measured way. So if you have survey data from your workforce, it's really valuable to look at that to assess people's readiness to re-enter. Potentially consider conducting focus groups or engaging with your workforce before they come back, and prepare a plan for how you're going to communicate with them. That may involve sharing with them some of the protocols that you'll find in our documents, signposting some of this stuff in the work environment, perhaps even preparing a frequently asked questions list. Maybe you have an intranet, you could include that on your own website. New wayfinding and signage indicating how people should move through the space being installed before they come, and telling people that that'll be there and that they're expected to follow it. And you might even consider a welcome guide, bringing people back and welcome back to our new world. Potentially some training. I know some organizations are working on unique training programs for their significant workforces coming back. And even if you don't have a large workforce, you may consider actually bringing people together in a way virtually to conduct maybe something like this, a little bit of a webinar perhaps, to help train people for how to behave in the office when they return to work. And then, engaging with people, allowing people to continue to give you feedback too is really important. That it's not just one-way communications; it's a two-way communication. And of course, protecting people's privacy and their right to not have to reveal all of their motivations for either returning to the office or remaining from home. So that's what I wanted to cover today. Those of you who have the documents that we've shared would recognize that there is a lot more to consider. And Michael's going to pick up some of those comments and as he talks about his organization's experience. Back to you, Jason.
And Tony, fascinating. Couple things I want to share with folks while Antonia was talking. In the chat function of the webinar, we posted the link to the study that she has referenced a couple times throughout the presentation. Several people have asked, hey, is this going to be available? You can get much of that through that link. And while she was talking, I was able to download that during the presentation. And so that's a very accessible document. You can find that link in the webinar chat. I just want to remind everybody, and we've had one person already, if you have questions for the Q&A portion, please don't wait. Go ahead and shoot those out now. We've got staff and myself that are watching that Q&A board, and I'm very pleased that we've got, over 60 people on the call today. So, Antonia, you were a big draw for the community today, and this has been really great information as people kind of figure out how they're going to get back to work. I know this is something I and my team are talking about right now in terms of how we're going to get back to serving the community.
Happy to help.
So we're gonna shift into the next part of the session, and we will circle back to Antonia and the others on the call here in the Q&A part of the session. So I'm very excited to welcome Michael Burleson. He's the Director of Finance and Facilities for Americas in the Emerson Automation Solutions, and that's a business unit of Emerson Electric. Michael has over 44 years of financial leadership experience with 5 companies and 22 years with Emerson Automation Solutions as their Director of Finance and Facilities for the Americas. Michael received his undergraduate from Southwest Missouri State University and completed his MBA and Master's in Accounting through the University of Phoenix and completed, we are thrilled to have Michael on the call today to share what Emerson Automation Solutions is doing right now. They're a major business presence here in Round Rock, who we are thrilled to have. Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Jason. Can you hear me just fine?
Yes.
So as we're basically returning to the office environment for us was started many months ago. As the pandemic started in March, we took the stance again that we were going to basically shut the facilities down. I oversee over 30 different sites in North America. And of those, we all basically had staying at home and what do we do? And then we started the process of what do we do when we're ready to come back to work? When will we do that and what will we do? First thing that came to mind is that we're basically a very safety oriented business. Go to the next slide. One of our core the things that we have that we've really established, the Emerson establishment, is with safety and quality. We're unwavering in our commitment to the highest standards of safety and quality for ourselves and our customers. That's basically one of our core elements of our business, and we take that very seriously, and that whether it be for our individuals, for our employees, for our customers that we're on site with. We're in every country in the world and every continent. And so with that, we're very conscious of what we need to do from a safety standpoint. When this pandemic hit, we basically were affected globally on a worldwide basis. And with that, we want to make sure that what we're doing is the right thing for all of us. So if we go to the next slide, one of the things that we want to do as far as when this happened is that we want to make sure that we're being aware of what happens to an environment. How do we go about doing this? What are some of the things that we need to talk about? And some of the things that Antonio talked about were basically very similar to what we have to do. Since we're dealing with this, and since we're dealing across all of North America and on the globe as far as Emerson's perspective, we talked about what do we need to, first things is, what's the safety of the people that we need to basically with. And with that, we basically start with your safety. We want you to go ahead and self-check yourself every morning. Want to take your temperature, make sure it's under 100 degrees. And if it's under 100 and you're feeling fine, then come to work. If you don't feel fine, we'd rather you stay at home. We don't want to take the chance of yourself or giving somebody else systemic with that. So as we come into our facility, you'll notice that we have a sign in the parking lot recommended we wear masks when we come in to our facilities. That's throughout all of our North America and across the world. We offer basically 2 masks for every person, and ones that are reusable. And with that, we want to make sure that you're aware of, if you're feeling sick, stay home. Have it in the garage here locally. We have it in the walkway. We have it in the lobby. It's well worth it, because we had an example is that we had one employee didn't feel well, came in anyway, felt she needed to come in and get some work done here on site. As her supervisor observed that she had a cough, was not feeling well, sent her home. We recommended she go home. We did identify that after doing that we needed to do some cleaning. So then we talked about the cleaning process. So there's 4 levels of cleaning process we'll walk through. What happens? We have to then identify where she went. We have 10 floors in our 2 buildings that we have here in Round Rock. And identify, did she go to all where we're at on the floor? Who did she talk to? Who did she have contact with? Did she go to the restroom? Did she go to the break room? We have to we had to do an interview of that employee to make sure of understanding where she had gone. With that, we go through what's called a scenario 1, 2, 3, or 4, and we decide whether there is some that she's either had contact with. Scenario 1 is to contact with a positive person have had COVID-19. Scenario 2 is that had contact with someone who is known to have it. Scenario 3 is an employee known or medically presumed positive. And scenario 4 is that you're actually have symptoms and have identified and taken the test, and you're now in quarantine. With those scenarios, we then have to go through a protocol with our HR, HSE, management, and facilities, decide then whether we take following actions, whether we quarantine, what level of cleaning we do, where do we end up as a quarantine area, clean the area, deep cleaning, or something else. So when we talk about cleaning, we'll talk about a little bit more about what's the full level of cleaning that we provide and making sure that we have a safe environment for our employees. Social distancing. We've gotten commented that we have enough signs up to plaster Wall Street, but we're probably wanting to make sure that we do the social distancing, the 6 feet, interpersonal space. We've identified the routes that we've come into our buildings. We've had markings on the floor. We've spaced out plans, using our badge to open the doors. We don't use fingers on any of our entrances. We found a commercial device that basically that goes on door handles, elevator buttons, coffee buttons, vending machines, door handles, that actually wraps around them and fits on those, and it kills the bacteria that's on your hands and the COVID-19 within 3 seconds. So we were able to find some of that, and we were able to put that in our facility. We've got it in our Round Rock facility right now. We don't have enough. We've ordered more, but we'll have it in all of our facilities before we get done with that. With social distances, we've decided not to have conference rooms open right now. We've limited the number of people in the elevator. We had 1, now we've gone to 2, which basically we're sick return. We basically come in with your mask, face the outside walls in the corners, and can go to your floor. Use the badges again for your elevator buttons. We have limited the number of people in a break room to 2. We've actually told a person, if you're in your office or in your cubicle, you don't have to wear your mask. But if you get outside of your office or your cubicle, then we require you to wear your mask in case you meet anybody in the hallway or anything like that. So as we talked about right now, we have no meeting rooms available. This is phase 1, happened after the pandemic, and as we've slowly tried to bring people back a little bit. As we talked about, we had normally between 800 and 900 people in the building, in our 2 buildings, and right now we have about 50 people that come in that are maintenance, janitorial, security, people that work with our customers as far as our day-to-day lives. So it's a big difference between 800, 900 to 50. And then on May the 4th, we opened up and said that we'll do a soft opening. It's your option to come in 1 or 2 days a week, do what you need to do, get comfortable coming back in. And we've set up all these as far as what we need to do then from a common area standpoint. What do we need to, we've had signs up, make sure that what you're doing. When you go to the break room, we want you to wash your hands, prepare your food. If you're touching your refrigerator, getting your food, or get a coffee or whatever, make sure there's only 2 people in there. When you're done, wash your hands again, nothing left out on the counters. as you can imagine, as we talked about, there's hundreds of things that we touch a day. And so what do? So we end up hiring extra day porters. We now have 4 day porters for 2 buildings, hitting those spots that we want to do with that. We provide, like I said, PPP, effective equipment for our employees. We want to make sure that they have the right equipment, that they feel safe, and we're doing everything we can for that. Next slide. So as an employee, we communicated, we built a SharePoint website. We have all the information out there. We actually got over 100 different documents and information that we have for our employees, what to do, what to check, how to be aware of what's going on. We have our employee, like I told you before, we want to check at home before you come. We have social distancing in the parking lot and signs to say, again, if you're sick, don't come in. We have sanitizer throughout the building. We put it in our building directory, where the sanitizer is located at, where the wipes are located at, and where they know automatically what to do. Our elevators, like I said, we now have 2 people that we have in an elevator. The stairwells, we have 4 and 2 in each building. And so we made 1 at A, 1 at B, one's up, one's a down, so that we don't have intercoms communicating any kind of contact during the day. Hallways, we basically had some hallways where we had A and B with that. Also, when we talk about A and B, we have our employees. When this first started, we designated A and B employees. A 1 week, B the next week. Then we follow that protocol. When you have to come in, you have to be on your A or B week. You can't cross-contaminate or cross-meet, and you can only come in on those days. Then we want to make sure that we have our coffee rooms, coffee areas. We self-sanitize those right now along with our day porters. The office areas, we disinfect those, and basically during the night with that. And again, with our day porters with that. Social distancing in restrooms, we've cut off some of the hand washing stations. We've not so far limited the number, but we do ask that they only 4 people in our restrooms on a floor. If you see more than that, then you need to leave and then wait until the other time. We have a cafe here at our in a dining area. We've closed that until here on May the 4th. We opened it back up, very limited. Prepackaged foods, designated only 7 people in the cafe at a time, 6 feet apart. Everybody gets handed their food. They basically, again, pay for it with either, again, with a person that has nothing but we'll deal with the cash register with that, and then they route back out around. We closed all seating in the cafe, and we told everyone that basically eat at their desks. This way to eliminate any kind of possibility of being too close with that. The meeting rooms, we did at the very beginning, closed all the meeting rooms. They're not open yet. Starting of June, we're going to open up to some of the larger meeting rooms. Again, have spacing, like a 15 by 20 room, a large conference room, normally seats anywhere from 15 to 20 people. We now have a seating of 6. So we're going to basically only want you to use that room if it's necessary. We've been very successful using all the communication tools such as Zoom and WebEx and so forth, but we want to do that. We also, all our public and common areas, want to make sure that we have signs up and people are aware. The biggest thing that we noticed is that some people still don't think it's serious. We're taking it very serious, and we're basically make sure we communicate to them on a daily basis almost that we have. Our steering committee, which is our presidents, and we have 4 presidents this building and 43 VPs. We're a global site, and of that, they all take it very seriously, that you need to be wearing your mask, you need to be social distance. It's best to have it from the top down. That way there's no issue about any kind of questioning or with that, what's going on with all of those. Go to your next page. We generated these signs throughout all the buildings. Watch your six, social distancing, if you feel sick again. And in the elevator, we now have 2 people in there. We started out with 1 with that. Building signage, I think, is very, very important. We have a lot of buildings that are we have several owned that we manage. We have several with our impact partners, which is basically with our sales force that we co-locate with, and they're in leased buildings or their own buildings. And we have the actual where we rent space in commercial buildings. So we have across the gamut. My role is to communicate with all those sites of how we want to do that. I've met with the landlords, I've met with the tenant owners, the property managers, of what we can do and how we make it safe for our employees coming into a commercial building. What we're going to do as far as one place, we have 3 floors and we have the whole floor. So basically we're cleaning the stairwells in between our floors. And so we're doing everything possible to make it feel safe for that employee. On the next slide, we talk about, again, we want to do self-screening. If it's 100 degrees or more, then you need to stay home. We've also went ahead and purchased for several of our larger sites the temperature scanning systems. We'll be installing those at our front lobbies, and it'll scan from a distance of about 2 meters and be able to tell that if a person has a temperature as they come in the building. We've limited the amount of contractors are not allowed in the building except what I mentioned before, which are our security and our cafeteria workers, our janitorial, and otherwise they can come to the front doors of all of our sites, drop the package off, and leave. Again, I'll be wearing a mask when they have to be delivered. Our mail has come in. We hold the mail for 24 hours before it's delivered. We don't touch it. Boxes, if it has to be delivered that day, we basically sanitize the boxes. Otherwise, it sits for 24 hours before we deliver it. And just some of the other things that we do as far as getting ready for that. Some of the other things that we've done is that when you're getting ready to open your building up, you need to basically look at your air handlers. If it's an old building, ask your landlord about the cooling systems, checking the filters, how much outside air is being returned in with that. Flush your plumbing systems for your coffee makers, ice machines, check the refrigerators, flush all your plumbings. We've closed down all water fountains. We don't have that anymore. Basically going to be, we just told they were off limits with that. Check all your lighting. If you have air compressors, check those. Your hot water heaters, make sure you flush those out. Those are just some of the things from an actual facility standpoint that we look at. Then you got to contact when you're coming back on. When you went away in March, you shut down your vendors. Your people coming in for pest control, coming in for shred binning, for checking your chemicals, for your elevator service, electricians, gyms. We have a gymnasium here on our site, and we had 2 of our sites basically, and we closed those down. We had towel service. So now then you've got to go through and talk about what do I need to do to reopen back up again. What if I come back with, we only have partial out of 900 people, we may only have 50, which is we did at the beginning. Now we have 100. Coming in June, we're going to ask more people to come in and work 2 or 3 days a week, which will have and only work on A and B. So with that, we're going to turn around and have maybe 200 people. But again, each one of these affects on what we're doing. You have plants. What do you do with all those? So you got to contact all those vendors. Vending. How do you want to handle those and bring them back and what time? Replace all you had. And because we shut down in March, take the vending, for example, had to get rid of everything in all the machines. They were all out of date. So those are just some of the things that we went through for many, many weeks to get ready for the building to come back. Go to the next slide. We talked about building cleaning. And so normally what happens is at our normal sites, we have a nightly cleaning crew that come in and they'll clean during the evening your whole site and our site here. And we have which all use CDC approved disinfectant and so forth with that. So in between that, we've added day porters in between which will be, we now have 4 for 2 buildings. And we turn around and we said, well, what happens if we need to do these other? So the method 2 is what we call our enhanced building cleaning. And with that, like I said, we've added extra day porters. We're doing multiple cleanings a day in traffic areas, handrails, stairwells, common areas, hitting all these areas that we feel like with that. So what happens if you have a case, as we talked about earlier in our scenario 1, 2, 3, or 4, and you've made a decision that now then we've got to clean the space. We need to either do that or we have to evacuate a floor, do a deep clean, which is number 4, which is we have an outside service that we have one of our companies contracted with that come in. And what do you have to do? And who makes the call? Who do we want to meet with? And so we have a team, like I say, of HSE, HR, senior management, our president, and the facilities, our group. And we sat down and we discussed what level of cleaning we have to do. At that point, once we go through the scenarios, that tells us. If it's a scenario basically where we definitely have somebody affected, they've tested positive. We've had one case where we had a person that was potentially tested positive. Their wife tested positive. So we had to shut a whole floor down, which is basically 25,000 square feet. We had to clean the whole floor. It was a lab area, which had over 300 computers on it. So we had to go in and shut that floor down for 3 days. Had 10 people come in and clean that floor, wipe down every surface on that floor, including all the computers, take it as a hazardous waste material. They had to contact the disposal from the government, and they came in and picked up. We had 8 barrels of material that had to be carted off and take that. To do that type of cleaning runs you anywhere from $30,000 to $40,000 to clean that much space. So it's quite expensive. So our goal is basically that we'd rather you to take care of yourself at home, turn around and not come in, and if we have to do that. We also have the fogging on number 3 we talked about a little bit, which is, we can fog like a break room where there's no computers, restrooms, and hallways with no people. Our next slide. We want to keep social distance in mind basically at all times. Be cognizant of your space. Again, we can't preach enough about staying home, doing self-testing upon yourself, and keep the 6 feet distance throughout. The next slide. We provided, like I say, we've mandatorily asked everyone now to wear masks. We've offered gloves for those that people in certain areas for us to use with that. We run across that. We want you to wear the mask properly. It's over your nose, over your mouth. It's not under your chin. It's not over your mouth, not over your nose. It's it's over your nose and mouth. Wear it properly. You should be able to breathe through it. We offer those. We have those for our employees, and we want to make sure that they're using those. We also have disposal ones in case rarely we have a person we have to bring in, whether it be for maintenance or some kind of we've not had any meetings here yet, but if they do, then we offer them a mask. We give them basically it's disposable, a sanitizer available at any point with that. The next slide. We had our cafeteria, again, we've talked about a little bit as far as what our limited prepackaged foods and drinks, limited head count, our distancing and what we've done with that, and wanted to make sure that we're eating at their desks. Next slide. Meeting etiquette. We again are looking at, once we open up our large conference room, we're going to have probably only about 6. We have 4 large conference rooms, and we'll open up here on the beginning of June. We're going to stay that way for a while and basically work and make sure that we do that. We're telling the people that we've done 2 different methods and basically with that we're trying out. First is we're going to have self-clean for the conference rooms, provide these cleaning materials in the conference room. As the leader comes into the conference room, as I talked about, first from the door sets first and sets around, so there's correct spacing. We've taken out all the chairs, put them in the conference room that are not open. Clean, and want that person to clean the area, clean the space, clean the desk, wipe down the chair handles, and basically have the space ready for a meeting. When it's done, that same person does it again. We only schedule meetings for 1 hour apart. And then I basically will have the day porter come in and clean that room also. We're coming up with a automated device that basically will alert us and notify the cleaning crew that is the room is available to be cleaned, an hour in between meetings, and then they'll have another meeting again at that point. That basically is what we're trying to do is from our side. We've had all kinds of FAQs that we've created for our employees. You can't communicate enough. I think that's the main thing with that. As far as our FAQ, we've asked, what cleaning is taking places, what rooms are closed. Like I said, we closed our cafe, our gym, our collaboration room. We have signed on the stairwells of up and down, limited capacity as far as what we want to do as far as that is concerned with that. Our A and B work groups. We also have a C work group, basically which is our group where we have to be here every day or most of the time, and for our facilities and so forth with that. Why are the water fountains closed? What changes we made in the break rooms? I'm expecting delivery. What do I do? Well, they can only come to the front door. So that is basically what we do as far as getting our sites ready. Be happy to answer any questions y'all have at the end.
Michael, thank you. That was comprehensive, and it's amazing to see the extra procedures that a business has had to put in place just to make sure we're keeping everybody safe. But we thank you because you are a major employer in the community for doing that, because it's not only keeping Emerson running, it's of course keeping our community safer as well and keeping the economy moving. So we appreciate that. Real quick before we get to Q&A, I want to introduce a couple other people that have been on the presentation with us. First up is Brooks Bennett. He's the Assistant City Manager at the City of Round Rock. Brooks and his team, I want to tell everybody, have been working so hard in this time. We appreciate everything the city has been doing. Brooks, welcome. You want to say a quick hello and any comments you have to add to the safety?
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Jason. Just, man, my head is swimming. I think that's what we've talked about today. It feels like that's something that might just be missing from the overall narrative in the universe, is just how much businesses care about their employees and their customers as we start to return back to work. Those just aren't stories that you hear out there. And when you look through everything that Michael just hit on, it's just incredible. And the amount of change that we've undergone as a society really over the past couple of months it's incredible how resilient we are as people, and how we can take things that change really quick and normalize them and move forward and come out positive. And another piece that I have thought about quite a bit over the past couple of months is trying to focus on the positive, and how in many aspects we are lucky that this didn't happen 15 years ago. I mean, we got tools like, iPhones now and computers and ubiquitous internet technology on some level. There's still some gaps and holes to fill there. But even the ability that we had over a couple months to have a huge portion of the workforce be able to go and work from home is staggering. Another thing just to kind of focus on, I guess, a little bit is, we live in one of the greatest states in the world, and Central Texas being the greatest region of the greatest state. And we have always been early to come out of these types of things, and the impact typically has been a little bit less. So, for those that don't know me, I was born and raised in Round Rock. So y'all were smart enough to move here. I was lucky enough to be born here. But, the hyper growth that we had coming out of the recession of the 1980s was incredible. And then, how we came out of the late 2000s. And I really just deep down feel like we are positioning ourselves to bloom and blossom as we move out of this. You see how the situation has been handled, in many respects, from all levels of government. It's just been really different across the country. And when you talk to those folks that are have businesses, especially on the West Coast, that have been looking to move here for a long time, I just see them really wanting to come here for future growth. So just kind of want to put that on the radar. Is, I think that as we turn the corner on this and move into the future, we're going to be positioned to come back stronger than we ever were. And I think Michael really hit it well. And it's, and let's be clear, coronavirus is here. It's, something we're gonna have to deal with for an unknown period of time as it stands today. And we need to make sure that we're protecting our most vulnerable populations from complications of COVID-19. And again, we need to be thankful that we live in a community with excellent medical care. We're not ultra dense. Our healthcare system hasn't been pegged like you've seen on the news and other parts of the country. But that doesn't mean that we don't need to be vigilant. And it means, we Central Texans once again, hopefully have a leg up on the rest of the world. So just encourage everybody to be smart, be safe, and, get us moving back to being the region and the nation that we work so hard for and deserve. So if there's anything that we can do at the city of Round Rock, to help you through that's what we're here for. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning, Jason.
Awesome. Brooks, thank you for being on the call today. And again, I want to remind everyone, if you have any questions that are more localized questions for the city, Brooks is an excellent resource. If he doesn't know the answer, he knows who can find the answer and address it very quickly. So thank you. And again, last thing before we get to Q&A, I want to turn it over to Derek Neal. Derek is with the Williamson County Cities and Health District. Derek, thank you very much for joining us on the call. And I've been, wondering what is it that you all recommend if in a place of work, a business, comes up with someone who says, hey, I ended up getting COVID. I'm isolating. I'm doing all those things. What responsibilities does the business have in terms of reporting with the Williamson County Cities and Health District?
Well, COVID-19 is a notifiable condition. So when you go to your physician or even one of our testing sites, they're mandated by Texas Health and Safety Code law to notify the health district. And what we do from that perspective is what everybody's been hearing about: contact tracing. We find out who that person has been exposed to, and we vigorously and as aggressively as we can go out to try to neutralize the threat and the spread of COVID. I don't have a whole lot to add. I can tell you that the silver lining in COVID is that a lot of individuals, including Brooks and Michael Burleson and Antonia, they've become public health ambassadors because they're knowledgeable about what it takes to stop and slow the spread. And that's what we need, is advocates within our community. So I want to commend you, Jason, for putting this on, because conferences are the gateway to business growth in our community and economic development. And what I want for us to be clear on, because you hear public health all the time, probably more than we ever heard in our life. Public health, we need the community to be extremely successful and business friendly, because when people aren't working, then it makes our job more difficult. So make no mistake about it, we need the business community to be open and functioning. We just want to see it be done safely. And that's what we've been hearing this morning in terms of what businesses are going to look like. As a health district, we have 5 different facilities in Williamson County, and we're trying to figure out, just like a lot of businesses are, how are we going to still deliver the same level of services, if not better, with fewer people in the building. And Michael did a good job of really articulating how that's going to be done. But what we're finding is that we can be more efficient and more impactful by working remotely in some ways. So we're really going to have to be strategic based on what our business models are in terms of how we go back to work. But make no mistake about it, we're working with municipalities within our 11 member cities in Williamson County, including Round Rock, in reviewing those plans to ensure that people can be safe coming back to work. We have an intergenerational workplace, and the last thing that we want is for a healthy employee to come in with a vector and take out or, essentially kill one of our older employees that may have an underlying health condition. And that's what we're talking about right now. So we have to be sensitive and cognizant of those things. And even employees who have spouses that are home that have underlying health conditions. These are all the considerations that we're going to need in moving forward. So the final thing that I would say, I don't want to take up too much time, is that keep in mind, we opened up on April 30th, or we're loosening the restrictions, but from a public health perspective, this virus remains prevalent in Williamson County, and we're still under a pandemic. Nothing has changed. We just have to find a way to coexist with COVID-19, as Brooks was saying, but we have to live our lives, but we have to do that in a safe manner by practicing social distancing and using those practices that we've been hearing from the CDC. So having said that, that's all, but I'm really proud today because I feel like we're creating minions or public health ambassadors, because you guys sound like that you miss your calling. I have to go find Michael Burlington because I think he has another career in public health, that's for sure. So thank you for the opportunity.
Excellent. Derek, thank you. Brooks, again, thank you for being on the call. Antonia, Michael, I'm going to ask you if you both don't mind turning on your videos and microphones. We're going to shoot through as many Q&As as we can. We've had several great questions come through, so I'm going to start with some of them from our audience. And I knew this one was going to come up. Michael, when you mentioned some sort of a product that you all are using that is either, it sounded like, wrapped or adhered around high touch point areas that kills any sort of virus. Someone's asked online, what product is that? Can you expand on that just a little bit?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I don't know the name exactly, but I'll get you the link and with the product name, and I'll send that to y'all, and we can get that out. We started trying to find it about in March, and I finally got the first delivery in May, and so it's very hard to get, but it works very well. We've had it at some of our sites already in Canada, and they're the one that found it for us, and so we'll get that for you.
Thank you very much. And then let's go up to, because this has been in the news a lot recently, and this was the first question to roll in. And I'll ask either or both, Antonia and Michael, to address it. We had a question, can an employee refuse to turn to work? And what protections did the employee have, and what protections does an employer have? And I know there's a lot in the public policy area that's being talked about right now. Can either of you expand on that?
Yeah, I don't have the legal position on that at all, and I'm sure that there are lawyers who would be happy to advise, or regulations that apply here. But irrespective of the legality of that situation, if I turn back to my comments before about separating the workforce into these three categories of who needs to come, who perhaps shouldn't come, and then everybody in between, I would really be thinking very carefully about which category this particular employee would be in. We at Cushman Wakefield, our first option is for people to elect to come back or not to come back. So, if people opt out, that's absolutely acceptable. There isn't a requirement to explain that either. Or if people are choosing to come back in, of course they need to be in the first group that we're allowing to come back in, but they're perfectly welcome to come. So, on what, which category would those folks be in? Are they critical for the services that are provided by the organization? Are they in that first tranche of people to come back or not? And are they able to work productively from another place without having to come back into the office? I would be asking the organization to think about those aspects of the employee before they got into a legal situation, but to others for the legal perspective.
Hey, Jason, yeah, the Texas Workforce Commission has guidance on return to work issues. So if you go to twc.texas.gov, they have a whole section for employees and employers for handling those types of issues as they arise.
Thank you, Brooks. twc.texas.gov. And I think someone hopefully will get that up in the chat. Yeah, very good. Thank you. Boy, we've got a lot of questions rolling in now. Let's jump to, actually, Antonio, I want to come back to you because a lot of what you presented on had to do with how we take pre-COVID building design standards and apply COVID-safe practices to that existing structure and that existing office layout. Moving forward, I know Cushman and Wakefield does a lot of work with companies that are considering expansions or refurbishing existing facilities. Do you think any of these practices that we're developing now for a temporary COVID mitigation effort end up impacting how we build buildings in the future long term?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there are particular, to pick up first on the sort of building services aspect, there are particular building services, air conditioning systems that help us with eliminating, infection. And those ones are going to become more commonly used. There are systems that have UV light within them that will kill virus particles. There are others that, the bipolar systems that shift the polarity and disable the infectious particles. So we're going to see those things, those kinds of services, those kind of systems installed as new normals. Of course, there are some cost implications associated with that, but as even Michael suggested, with the cost implications of cleaning after somebody has been infected in the work environment, these small changes to our building systems costs will be overlooked in the long run. I think we'll also be addressing entrances and exits, the barriers within our building design in a slightly different way going forward, such that we can have people, if you like, especially in places where the climate is hospitable, sort of waiting outside of the building perimeter and only the essential people coming through into buildings. I think there's probably a lot of people in all parts of the world scratching their heads about what on earth are we going to do about elevators in the long run. Are we going to see enormous elevator carriages? Are we going to see twice as many elevators as we did before? I know there's always been an issue about speed of elevators, but if you've ever been in a really fast elevator, sometimes your tummy ends up in your mouth, and that's not a nice experience either. So, there's a lot to be said about moving people through vertical space. And as we think about our high-rise cities, how are they really going to adjust and move forward? There's a lot to be thought of. When we think about the office itself, many of the practices that we've mentioned here this morning, I think, may become more commonplace. I think we will see the spread out of desks with greater distances between seats come back in some way. In one of these other webinars, I was asked about individual offices for everybody. I absolutely do not think that will ever come back, and I'm certainly hoping it doesn't. And the reason why I think it won't come back is, what's the point of going to an office to sit in a box and not interact with anybody else? If you needed to do that, perhaps you could stay at home or be in another place to do that. And so I think one of the real advantages of having offices going forward, and some people have even asked me, is the office going to die? Absolutely not. The office is a visible, physical manifestation, the body language, if you like, of the culture of an organization. And organizations will continue to need that, especially in the future as they onboard new people. How do you understand what it is that's important to this organization? How do you understand the social norms? How do you understand what are the cultural practices of an organization when you can't be together with its people? And so I think the office will survive.
Excellent.
Antonio, that was one of the great things in one of your slides that struck me, was just that it's not an office, it's an ecosystem.
Absolutely.
That's just fascinating, and it's how you build your culture and how you and for us, especially working in government, we get the perception that we're behind the curve and stodgy. And so this is an opportunity for us to look at work from home initiatives, flexibility, work-life balance. So it is kind of kicking us in the pants too in some industries that hadn't really thought that direction to get with the times a little bit.
Yeah. Well, this experiment has been incredible. It's forced everybody to work from home and to work out whether that can work for them. And on an individual basis, it's been very successful for some and less successful for others. And so as we think about all of those people using all of those practices in our workforce, how do we enable that to continue in some way?
We had some folks that were really excited to work from home, and now they're not quite as excited anymore. So, I mean, that part of the experiment is fascinating too, where you always quested for this thing, and then once you had it, you go, it wasn't as exciting as I had built it up to be.
Quick question that's come in online for anyone that can answer it, because I don't know. One person's asking, does an employer have a right to use thermal scanners in an open area of entrance?
I would think so. Now, can they demand or require that? There's a separate question, but I believe that we have the right to ask.
Yeah.
And that was interesting in one of Antonio's slides too, kind of the pyramid, right? Different levels of that pyramid are going to have different authorities to do different things. So I guess it would fall back on where on that pyramid is the scanning being done.
I think that's part of the new frontier right now is what rights does a business have? What obligations do they have to their team members? Because certainly they do have obligations to their team members. And then what can they be requiring their clients to do? And we've seen this with masks. We probably will see it with temperature scanning and other things as our customers come in the door. And I'm sure there'll be others in the future.
Yeah, I think the reality is, and we always hear about, and public health stays away from the politics of it, but sometimes we get caught up in the politics, right? So I think the perspective is, as employees, I serve as the executive director of the health district. It's my responsibility to ensure that I have a safe, healthy workplace for my employees. That's important. So one of the things that we started doing months ago when we stood up the Emergency Operations Center was the algorithm that you had to go through was meeting that temperature requirement and not feeling ill and walking through those doors. The challenge with having a national testing strategy is that 30% of the tests that are on the market are flawed. You get a lot of false positives and the false negatives. So until we develop a level of confidence in the testing system that we have, the only thing that we have to protect us are strategies like having a thermal system, like having the thermometers that we assign to each employee. You have to have some type of baseline in order to start the business. The things that we do know that work are social distancing and those hygiene requirements that we talk about. But let's not be lost in this madness. It's something about COVID that we don't know. We find out about this disease every day, something different, and we can't protect ourselves against what we don't know. So until that time, we have to be overreactionary in setting up those protections. And I think we've done a good job of talking about that. So I just wanted to make sure that I pointed that out. And it's perfectly okay that we don't know everything. Just have the good horse sense to admit that we don't. We can move forward.
Yeah. Derek, I'll build on that. We know that about a quarter of the people who test positive are asymptomatic.
Right.
So we actually dwell on the consequences of that. Somebody who doesn't have a temperature, who's not coughing and spluttering or other things, having chest pains or whatever other elements would be symptoms, those people can come into our offices.
Right.
Right? And so, and somebody might be asymptomatic today, but symptomatic tomorrow. Right? So they were at work today, but tomorrow they're sick. Doesn't mean they weren't sick yesterday, etc. So we need to assume in our work environments that we will have people who carry the virus.
Right.
Now our behaviors change.
And I think that
Now we don't want to be passing those people in the stairs, huffing and puffing. Now we don't want to be holding the, sharing the sink in the bathroom with them, etc. So we do need to have that in mind and not get complacent and relaxed about that.
Well
I think
said.
that was another thing to me that struck me through this is just kind of the concept of science and what we expect as a people out of science. And science is not all answers being perfect. Science is it's a method. It's a quest for knowledge. It's a study of the physical world through observation and experiment, and that's what we're still going through, and we're still learning how this works. So you'll hear a lot of the scientists were wrong, the scientists this and that on a whole host of issues, but what we're doing is we're gaining knowledge and we're learning how to handle this issue moving forward. We're getting smarter every day.
Right.
We're working as fast as we can as a society, but it's just not fast enough at this point. But we got to stay positive and keep moving. I think Derek hit that really, really well.
Well said. Thank you.
Well, everyone, I knew this was going to happen with this awesome panel that we put together. We have fully exhausted our time. Again, I want to thank Antonia and Michael for sharing these amazing best practices. Brooks, Derek, we appreciate your time being on the call and participating in the dialogue. And most especially, Evelyn with Express Commercial Cleaning. Thank you so much for making the session possible today. As has been mentioned a few times, the session has been recorded. It's going to go up on our COVID page at the Chamber, so you can get to that at roundrockchamber.org, and we'll be able to find this easily. So if there's something that came up in the session that you want to see or hear again, or share this with a friend, please do that. Again, we've had all in our chat, we've had all the links and websites go up that we have been talking about. And we will have those on our COVID page as well, or at least next to the event, I believe. So with that, I want to thank everybody again for making this just a great dialogue. We will look forward to getting to see everybody in person safely soon. Everyone be safe out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.